Before first light, fog hangs over Lauterbrunnen, and somewhere on a slope you cannot see, one cowbell answers another. 72 waterfalls fall into this single valley in the Swiss Alps, and the water never stops. Here, time is measured in seasons, not in hours. And the people who live this way chose it. The Alps cover close to 60% of Switzerland. Around 70% of the whole country is mountain, yet only about a quarter of the population lives up in that terrain. It is a nation built mostly out of height, a country where the flat parts are the exception and the vertical is the rule. And Switzerland holds more of that height than its size would suggest. It contains only about 14% of the entire alpine range, but within its borders sit 48 of the 82 peaks that rise above 4,000 meters across the whole chain. The highest, Du Vorspitze, reaches 4,634 meters. More than half of the roof of the Alps belongs to one small country. So imagine standing at the bottom of the Lauterbrunnen Valley. The walls climb almost straight up on both sides, and from their edges, 72 waterfalls pour down at once. The tallest, the Staubach, drops around 300 meters in a single fall, so far that the wind turns the bottom of it into drifting mist before it ever reaches the grass. Clouds move sideways past the windows of the houses here. It is one of the reasons travelers have called this one of the most beautiful valleys in the whole range. Lake Geneva, the largest alpine lake in Europe, spreads across 581 square kilometers and sinks to 310 meters deep. On a still morning, its surface holds the snow peaks upside down, flat as a sheet of glass. And for a moment, the mountains seem to exist twice. This is the first breath of the place. The rest of it is stranger, and it starts with what survives up here. High above the villages, the Aletsch Glacier moves. It is the largest glacier in the Alps, roughly 23 kilometers long and covering around 82 square kilometers, and it forms the heart of the Jungfrau Aletsch region, named a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2001. It is, in effect, a river of ice, flowing so slowly that a single stretch of it took thousands of years to arrive where it now sits. Around that ice, the weather writes two different worlds onto the same ground. In summer, the meadows open into wildflowers and the mountain air stays thin and cool. In winter, the snow closes over everything, and the villages fall into a deep, muffled quiet. People here do not resist that rhythm. They arrange their whole lives around it. Some of what lives on these slopes almost did not survive at all. The ibex, the wild mountain goat with the great curved horns, was hunted out of Switzerland entirely by 1809. For nearly a century, there were none. Then, in 1906, a few animals were quietly smuggled back from Italy, and reintroduction began in 1911. Today, there are more than 17,800 of them, the largest population in Europe. The Edelweiss grows between 1,800 and 3,400 meters, clinging to bare rock, its petals covered in fine white hairs that shield it from the cold. For generations, a young man was said to climb the most dangerous faces to bring one back, proof of his courage offered to the woman he loved. The flower became a promise you could hold in your hand. And the slopes still move with life. Chamois leap gaps of up to 2 meters at dawn and dusk. Marmots whistle a warning that carries across a whole hillside. A golden eagle, with a wingspan reaching 2.2 meters, turns slow circles above the meadows. Nothing here is staged. It lives the way it always has. Now bring all of that down to where people actually settle, and something unusual happens. In some of these places, the car just stops. Zermatt sits at 1,605 meters beneath the Matterhorn, and it allows no private cars at all. You drive as far as Tesch, leave the vehicle behind, and change to a train or a small electric taxi for the last stretch. What is left, once the engines are gone, is air that smells only of stone and grass, and a soundscape made of footsteps and bells. Above it stands the Matterhorn itself, 4,478 meters, the most recognized peak in the Alps, even though it ranks only 10th by height in Switzerland. It is the mountain printed on 1,000 daydreams. The Jungfraubahn, a cogwheel railway, climbs to the Jungfraujoch at 3,463 meters, the highest railway station in Europe. It was built between 1896 and 1912, cut through 7 kilometers of tunnel, bored straight into the mountain. And the wider network still runs. Swiss federal trains reach their destinations on time 94.1% of the time in 2025, tying even the high villages into a single national grid. There is one more thing that draws people here. This is one of the safest corners of the world. Switzerland sits year after year among the most peaceful countries measured by the Global Peace Index, ranked in 2025 among the very top. It is the kind of place where a door can be left unlocked, where children are sent out to play in a yard without a second thought. Imagine waking up here. That is the feeling the mountains are selling. What they are not showing you yet is the work. The dream ends where the alarm begins, and up here, it begins early. On a summer morning, the day starts before sunrise, around 5 o'clock. The first milking happens in half-light, the animals warm against the cold, each breath hanging visible in the thin mountain air. It is only the first task of a day that has many. The cows are not numbers. Each one has a name and a temperament, and the people who tend them speak about them as members of the household rather than units of production. A herder can tell you which cow leads, which one sulks, which one always drifts to the far edge of the pasture. It is not detachment from the world. It is a very close attention to a very small one. The people behind that rhythm are fewer than you might think. Switzerland holds just over 9.1 million people as of late 2025 and speaks 4 official languages: German, French, Italian, and Romansh, the last spoken by only about 0.5% of the country. But in a mountain village, the first language anyone learns is the season. Whatever you say, and in whichever tongue, the calendar of the pasture speaks louder. The morning has its own small ritual before the work. There is a drink called Kaffeeschnaps, weak coffee cut with plum or pear spirit and a single sugar cube, taken before heading out to milk. Warm and sharp at once, it marks the scene between sleep and the long day ahead. Then the door opens, and the cold comes in, and the season takes over. The alpine terrain is too steep and too narrow for large-scale industrial farming. Machinery that flattens a prairie has nowhere to go here. So the work bends to the mountain instead of the other way around, rotating the pastures, protecting the thin soil by hand, moving the herds to follow the grass. Each summer, roughly 400,000 cows, along with some 200,000 sheep and goats, are brought up to the high mountain pastures. More than 6,000 grazing operations run across the country during those months, using over 1/3 of all its farmland. It is a working system, seasonal and vast, written across the whole spine of the Alps. People had to learn to live this high, and someone was first. The Walser, a group speaking an Alemannic dialect from the Wallis region, migrated and settled around 150 communities at altitudes up to 1,600 meters across the Alps, between roughly 1150 and 1450. They were among the first to turn raw mountainside into a place a family could actually inhabit, clearing, building, and staying where almost no one had stayed before. What they passed down was not only technique, but a stance toward the land. Farmers here tend to see themselves as keepers of the ground for the next generation, not owners set on extracting from it. The long-term fertility of a slope matters more than a single good year. It is a way of thinking that treats the mountain as something you borrow and hand on. Some of that morning milk never leaves the mountains. It goes straight into a copper cauldron and is heated over a wood fire. No electricity, no gas, right there at the hut on the high pasture. This is how Alpkäse is made, the true alpine cheese, produced only above 1,400 meters and only between June and September, in the short window when the herds are up on the grass. La Gruyère AOP takes around 400 liters of milk to make one average wheel of roughly 35 kilograms, pressed for about 20 hours under a force reaching 900 kilograms. A whole morning's yield from a herd, reduced by fire and pressure into one heavy disc you could carry under an arm. Then time takes over as the final ingredient. Each wheel is aged in a cellar for months, sometimes for years, turned and brushed with salt water on a schedule that never hurries. There is a stamp on many of these wheels, and it is not decoration. AOP, Appellation d'Origine Protégée, is a protected label that guarantees a cheese comes entirely from its true region of origin, made by the traditional method. A great many of the Swiss alpine cheeses carry it. You can taste the rules in specific names. Ledevaz AOP is made between the 10th of May and the 10th of October, at altitudes from 1,000 to 2,000 meters, aged at least 5 months on spruce boards. The finest is dried for 3 years to become Hobelkäse, shaved into thin curls. Each cheese carries its own calendar. And some carry the season in their very existence. Vacherin Montour AOP is a seasonal cheese, made and sold only from October to April, wrapped in a band of spruce bark that holds its soft body together. Its name belongs to a stretch of the year, the way the whole of this life belongs to the turning of the months. You cannot have it in July. The people who do this work go home to houses that tell their own long story. The wooden chalet is not a style borrowed for tourists. Wide eaves built to hold off the snow, beams carved with symbols, balconies hung with drying hay. The planks run 7.5 to 15 centimeters thick, and the larch wood from the Valais darkens over the years from gold to near black. A chalet often grew in stages, a floor added on as the family did, so the size of the house is a record of the size of the household. Inside, the 4 seasons shape the day as surely as they shape the year. Winter is for mending tools beside the stove. Spring is for sowing. Summer is for making hay. Autumn is for the harvest, and for a kind of gratitude that the year gave enough. The house is never really still, it only changes what it is busy with. Älpler Magronen is the herder's own dish, pasta and potatoes cooked together with cream and cheese in a single pot over an open flame. It is the kind of meal that fills a body after a day of labor and asks nothing fancy of the cook. It is comfort earned rather than bought, eaten where the work was done. Step out the door and the same logic scales up from the house to the whole village. Life here is organized around what is shared: the church, the dairy, the market square. Neighbors help one another bring in the hay, mend a fence, tend the animals when a family cannot. Mutual aid is not the exception that gets remembered. It is the ordinary spine that holds the place together. And that trust has a paper trail older than most countries. The all-men system, the commonly held grazing land and shared resources, is managed collectively by the village under clear rules. In the village of Turble, written records governing the shared water and the common pastures survive from the year 1483. The weekly market carries more than goods. Cheese, vegetables, honey, and handmade things change hands, yes, but so does news, advice, and friendship. It is where a scattered mountain community becomes a community at all, one morning a week in one square. And the biggest decisions can still be made by a show of hands. In many mountain municipalities, residents still gather in person at a Gemeindeversammlung and vote on village matters directly, in front of one another, rather than through an elected council alone. Governance here can still be something that happens at eye level, close enough to see the faces of everyone the choice will touch. Some of these places sit right at the point where the road gives up. Mürren, in the canton of Bern, stands at around 1,650 meters and holds more than 400 residents, the highest permanently inhabited village in the canton, and it bans cars completely. Gimmelwald, lower down at about 1,365 meters and home to fewer than 150 people, requires villagers to park their vehicles down in the valley and come up without them. The road does not reach the life begins where the road ends. To feel how remote that really is, look higher still. Juf, in Graubünden, sits at 2,126 meters and is the highest permanently inhabited settlement in Europe, with only around 30 residents. Against a standard like that, a place like Mürren still counts as large. This is a country with villages stacked so high that the ordinary ones look busy by comparison. Up here, quiet is not an accident, but an agreement. Sunday is treated as a day of near-total silence by an unwritten rule. To cut grass or swing a hammer on that day is understood as an intrusion on a piece that belongs to everyone, not just to you. The stillness the visitors come to photograph is, in fact, something the residents actively keep. Even the music here was born from the job. The alphorn, that long curved instrument now played for audiences, began as a herder's tool, used to call the cattle back from the far pastures to the barn for milking. Its sound carried across the valleys because it had to, long before anyone thought of it as a performance. The romance came later. The function came first. The same is true of the bells. The heavy cowbells on their hand-embroidered straps serve a plain purpose, locating a herd spread across a wide and folded pasture. And they double as a mark of status, the finest ones saved for prize animals and festival days. An object that is both practical and sacred at once. You hear it as music from the valley. Up close, it is a tracking device, a trophy, and a habit older than anyone alive. Life on the high meadows often comes without a paved road, without mains electricity, without internet. The work follows the mountain weather, which is unreliable and abrupt, far more than it follows any clock. There is a version of freedom in that, and there is a version of hardship. And up here, they turn out to be the same thing wearing different light. Then, at the end of the season, the mountain gives back everything it took, all at once. In late summer, between the middle of August and September, the cattle are brought down from the high pastures in a formal procession. It is called the Alpabzug or the Des Alpes, and it is the largest celebration of the entire alpine year, the moment the whole village turns out to watch the herds come home. The cows come down crowned. The wreath set on a cow's head is called a chepel, a tradition of the Prättigau region in Graubünden, woven from sunflowers, daisies, and dahlias depending on the season. And it is not given out freely. Only the cow that produced the most milk, or the one that leads the herd, is allowed to wear it. The animal that worked the hardest walks down the mountain wearing the proof of it. At St. Serge, in the canton of Vaud, around 700 cows, goats, donkeys, and dogs parade through the center of the village alongside their herders, with cracking whips, waving flags, and the sound of the alphorn. This is not a show arranged for a bus of tourists. The village would do it whether anyone came or not. That is the difference you can feel in it. The climb up the mountain in early summer, the Alpaufzug, happens quietly, almost unremarked. It is the descent in autumn that becomes the festival, with its alphorns, its yodeling, its traditional dress. The celebration lands on the coming home, not the going up. And in that choice you can read something the whole culture believes about the end of hard work. The season ends, and there is one last thing to divide. It is called the Schästeilet, and in the Justistal, in the canton of Bern, it has run for nearly 300 years. All the cheese made on the mountain over the summer is shared out among the herd owners by a formula, based on how many milking cows each contributed and how much milk those cows gave. Any surplus is bought back by the farmers for cash. And, like everything else here, it comes wrapped in a festival. How do these people actually live? The answer is cheese and livestock, and it is also public support. Alpine grazing receives a subsidy of 370 Swiss francs per standard livestock unit. One large animal grazed for 100 days on the mountain. In 2024, that covered roughly 306,000 such units across the country. The simple life, it turns out, is something a wealthy society chooses to hold up on purpose, because it decided this way of using the mountains was worth keeping. And it is held up inside one of the most expensive countries on earth. Zurich and Geneva sit near the top of global cost of living rankings year after year into 2025 and 2026. The peace of a mountain village does not mean cheapness. It sits inside a nation where almost nothing is cheap. The quiet is not the absence of money. It is a decision about what the money is for. For all its endurance, this life is quietly contracting. The number of summer grazing farms on the mountains fell from 7,472 in 2003 to 6,663 in 2021, a drop of around 11% in 18 years. The high pastures face a hard arithmetic of profitability and a shortage of people willing to do the work, and every closed operation is a slope that goes untended. The effort to hold the line is real, though nobody pretends it is winning easily. A program called Alp Future, run by Agroscope with the research institute WSL, has looked for ways to keep the mountain pastures alive. And the labor gap is already filled in part from outside. Roughly a third of the people herding cattle and making cheese on the Alp come from neighboring countries, because there are not enough hands at home. Still, some choose it anyway. A number of young people take up the work of their parents, and a number of newcomers arrive looking for exactly this, drawn not by ease, but by the fact that the life is real. It is a thing still being decided, one season, one family, one difficult choice at a time. It is not even frozen in the past. Modern tools enter selectively. A milking machine, a weather app, a solar panel, taken up where they help and refused where they would break the thing worth keeping. Because simple, in this valley, does not mean doing less. It means doing fewer things and doing them deeply. One wheel of cheese made across a single season. One herd of cows called by name. One valley that belongs to you and to which you belong, set against a city that does 1,000 things and belongs to none of them. And so the day closes the way it opened. The fog settles back over the valley. The last bell finds its answer somewhere on the slope, and the chalet holds its single light against the coming dark. Time here is still measured in seasons, not in hours. The people who live this way already know what the rest of us keep asking. That home is not the place you escape to. It is the place you are willing to stay. If a valley like this one still lives somewhere in the back of your mind, it is worth asking what you would give up to reach it, and what, in truth, you would gain.